Friday afternoon, once again, has come here in downtown Honolulu. Ted Ralston hosting our show, Where the Drone Leads on Think Tech Hawaii. And we have, once again, in our studio here, we have Terry Visperas from the Department of Health. Terry, good to see you here. I want to borrow that Aloha shirt next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have John Shear from, I got to get that right, John, your affiliation. Help me out. ReadyZoneHQ, right on. And you guys actually have come back here after a month, the first time being on the show. And let me just brag up the show a little bit. Can I? You guys mind if I brag up the show a little bit? This show gets stuff done. We had you on a month ago. We made some promises, had some decisions, some ideas, and brought you back on because we fulfilled those obligations. Now we have some analysis to do. But just to finish the story, just so you know, about 3 weeks ago on this show, we had actually a delivery ceremony of the first UAV parts made in Hawaii that were being shipped off to Alaska to operate in the frigid north of the Arctic Circle up there in the ice and rain and snow and such. So Hawaii parts operating in an austere northern environment. And then 2 weeks ago on this very show, we actually successfully negotiated a raise for the guy who has the 2 o'clock slot here at the show, Ethan Allen, and we got him, actually got his salary tripled right here by negotiating on the show. So there's a lot of value to coming on this show. In fact, if you want to own the show, I'm willing to make that offer to either of you. Anyway, where the drone leads, this time the drone leads back to where it started, which is at this table about a month ago when we talked about the Strategic National Stockpile exercise that Terry is responsible for at Department of Health, and John is the hired gun who makes it happen through your consulting organization, which is really an interesting thing. I had never heard about the Strategic National Stockpile. I suspect a lot of people hadn't. And what we decided on this show was that we'd try to videotape it by getting GoPros like this attached to people's helmets so they're running around. We actually have live video of what it's like to be on the inside of the exercise. And then this little guy and some other friends of his were flying overhead inside, but remote and back away from people, just as an example of how area surveillance might occur in a situation like what you had put together. So at some future time, a third time for you to come on the show, we'll actually have that video analyzed and some of the stills analyzed. I will tell you, looking through them, the videos from the helmet camera, they're awesome. Somehow a GoPro stuck in somebody's face pulls out their personality. They talk, hi GoPro, and they talk about things, and then hi mom, and you know, all that stuff, just like on the NFL. And it's really opens up a whole dimension here. And of course, the UAV is providing the setback and looking at the situation, including in infrared, so you can see the situation by body temperature if in fact there were no lights. There's all kinds of interesting things here that you'll see in the video that you know. I think you have a thumb drive here, don't you? Somewhere where it has it. So tell us how the exercise came out from your perspective.
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, you know, on so many levels we want to say thank you again for the time that you provided, the opportunity to talk story about the Strategic National Stockpile. We have so many wonderful things to talk about. Again, we had over 1,000 people on both days that came out, participated, got involved with the full-scale exercises the day of the event. You know, prior to coming on the show, we had challenges getting volunteers to come out, but we knew by coming onto the show that we would get that much more.
Once again, this is the show that gets it done, man. That's fantastic. Thanks, Terry. That's worth $5 right there.
That's right. That's right. So we had a lot of fun, and then we talked a little bit about when we were here in the first show that you would support with the drones, and that was a great thing. You talked a little bit about the cameras. That was also a valuable thing. But I gotta tell you that the exercise overall was just fantastic. We had a lot of great cooperation with a lot of the emergency preparedness, a lot of the security agencies, both state and city. Local law enforcement came out to support, and really the people that signed up to participate as actors going through our lines, and also the wealth of knowledge through the players that went through the full-scale exercise and set up as they would in a normal open pod was fantastic. So all around, it was just a very, very successful event. Thanks to John stepping in and helping us with the coordination efforts, and just fantastic to know that the Department of Health is ready with its partners to provide support in case we ever had to activate the Strategic National Stockpile.
And I'm sure that model would apply in other aspects of Department of Health operations. SNS is one aspect, but other aspects of disaster management and such require the same level of participation and understanding. And there's a whole aspect of cognition, how people see what's going on, decide what to do, and be part of that. So, John, from your perspective, how did things come out?
Sure. I thought it was a great exercise. I mean, it was one of those, type of exercises with a full scale where you've got lights and sirens, you got all the different organizations participating. So you really get a chance to see how they use their equipment, to see how well they're trained, and really to kick the tires on the plans. And so we really tried to exercise all aspects of the plan, try to bring the right organizations together. And what the exercise did was it enabled all the organizations to really take a hard look at their training efforts, what they need to do to get their personnel prepared. And we had some organizations that spent, a significant amount of time preparing, and other ones that just said at the last moment, hey, you need to respond, just like what happened in normal disasters. So we really got a chance to see both sides of people that had been trained on the plan, what they needed to do, and people that had never been trained on the plan, how they'd respond.
You know what, one thing I was thinking of going through the videos, again, videos there's an upside and a downside to anything when you collect information. If you collect information, you have to do something with it. And videos are basically a real-time recording of what went on. So whatever amount of time was spent, you have double that now in terms of the analysis. If you have 2 cameras like we had, you have 3 times the amount of time actually spent. So going through these files and deciding what they're telling you is a whole issue all by itself. So I had a whole bunch of thoughts on that. One of them was to maybe grab some students of, say, the film or the acting business who are into screenwriting and this sort of thing. They write screens to tell a story. They have a story arc, and they have issues and timing and such. It'd be interesting to have them take a look at the actual videos and without having any knowledge of what went on, and see if they can construct what the screenwrite was, the screenplay was for what they saw. And they would see things through their lens, which I don't understand necessarily. But what I observed is that you do see a lot of pacing issues, pacing items. There's a lot of time that's inactive, which is what happens when you have a complex situation. So how people deal with that and how people get around that would be something that's probably discoverable in the video that you probably can't discover in the photographer walking around type taking pictures, because that doesn't necessarily tie things together in a dynamic way. So I just offer that as a great way to, what would a screenwriter think of that information that was collected? And I'll say, here I am talking. We don't allow monologues in this show, but every now and then they happen, I guess. But Calvin Kalilimoku out in Waimalao and his wife, Frencha. Everybody knows Frencha.
Sure.
Calvin's the guy behind Frencha, sort of. And anyway, Calvin was there, and he's a perfect guy. He was, I think, a drill sergeant in the Army, so he's seen every facet of personality and interaction and stress you can imagine. He was acting as a play acting, as a irritated citizen. He was acting kind of like a jerk, which actually may come naturally, knowing Calvin. And he suppresses it normally, but it had a chance to come out. So he was using this story that, hey, I saw on TV, we're supposed to come down here at 9:15 and collect our meds, and my kids are there, and my wife's there, and the dogs are there, and the horses, and I came down here at 9:15, nothing's ready. What am I gonna do? Well, I can't trust you. The governor said 9:15, I'm here. Governor, what's going on? How come? He could generate any adverse reaction on the part of the people who are acting as the stewards of the operation. So that sort of thing that's real.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just think that some form of analysis would be really interesting here. How do people really, when they're impressed in that situation, how do they make decisions? Is there a more effective way to communicate? Is there a more effective way to accelerate the process or something?
We have found, I'm a member of the International Association of Emergency Managers, and we look at emergency management as a profession. And one of the things we look at is how do you train people in responding to disasters? And multimedia is key. Everybody looks at adult learning. People don't want to just listen to a bunch of lectures. They don't want to watch a bunch of slides. So to have the videos from the drones and have the videos from the GoPro where you can embed those in the training, I think was really going to help. We really saw the need, and I think we'll see in the after action report, for that hands-on training. It's really beneficial to walk people through exactly what they need to expect, so you can put a vignette like the one you were saying from the actors with the video, put that in front of the players and say, how would you respond? What would you do to calm this person down? And it just needs to be a 10, 15-second clip, and it makes all the difference in terms of training value.
That's interesting. So I think you could extract a lot of that from this particular set of videos here. And the nice thing about GoPros is everybody knows how to use
Right.
them. They're not, and they're all like fail-proof, right? They work.
Right.
And you could even put them out in the rain. If it's raining, it doesn't matter. It's going to go and catch that. So let's, I'd like to introduce the UAV aspect of it. There's a special reason for that. I have to give a talk in June at the National Fire Prevention Association in Las Vegas, and I really need to pull on what we did here as part of that prep. So let me spend the break time thinking about that, and we'll get back and talk about that subject, cognition, when we get back from our first break.
Okay.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon. And on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Justine Espiritu, and I am the co-host of Hawaii Farmers Series. This is my co-host, Matthew Johnson, and we are live with you every Thursday at 4 p.m. at thinktechhawaii.com. And our show focuses on Hawaii's local food community. We feature not only the farmers that are producing our food, but we also feature the supporters and other folks involved in the community that are trying to promote local agriculture.
Second segment on our show here, folks, on Friday, downtown Honolulu. Terry Visperas again, and John Shear, soldiers of this show from the past, and we're just during the break talking about some of the discoveries we might make coming out of these kind of exercises in terms of how people react and how people think, and how we introduce technology into an organization or a process that doesn't necessarily have an open door to technology or an open door to new things, because the people have been trained in a certain way, they've been rewarded a certain way, they have credentials that are a certain way, which don't reflect that new technology. From your perspective, interjecting new technology in either the exercise or SNS for real, how would you open that door? How would you encourage that kind of
Well,
thing?
you know, I think overall we talked about how the exercise was very successful. I thought that I also wanted to make mention that we had 100% feedback in terms of evaluations from the active participants that came that day.
I mean, 100% of the people said, so that,
turned in their
the fact that they
evaluations, said
spent the time to write
that's
something
right.
down is a
sure did.
really significant
And you know,
comment.
everybody was very impressed with the overall exercise and the process. But I did see, you know, a lot of the, you talked about the GoPro and the drone, that was in action in the going through the lines and the some of the people, the actors. So that, along with the evaluation, will make the exercise that much more effective, the real life planning that much more effective, because we get to see it from all documented spaces. And you know, it's stuff that video, it's pictures that we can use. Again, John talked a little bit about you know, visualization and utilizing multimedia. You know, while they're standing in line, we have now video compliments of your crew there that will provide that to us, and they can anticipate those kind of things going into the line. That'll all cut down on the wait time outside. People will be that much more prepared. We can, again, utilize segments of that to do multimedia training with other partners in our...
You just hit the nail on the head. You had said something very significant to me in regard to this obligation I have in June to be ready to speak to the National Fire Prevention Association on introduction of technology in their business, which is firefighting. Exercises are a great way to open that door, aren't they? I'm just paraphrasing kind of what you said, but the exercise could have a technology component where different forms of technology are simply expressed. They aren't necessarily injected into the ICS, or they're just there, and they get to show themselves. And that would then show how people react to these things, and then that would train you as to how to find a way to inject them into the real operations downstream.
And for this particular exercise, it's really how we use the technology. We used a lot of technology pieces that were not transparent to the players. So for example, every single person registered using a web-based registration system. So years ago, you would have put out an ad on the local, on Star Advertising. You say, hey, you need to, participate in an exercise, and whoever shows up, shows up. Everybody for this event registered ahead of time, so we knew how many people to expect. We knew any issues ahead of time, if they needed a wheelchair or they needed other types of access, sign language interpreters, all that was asked ahead of time, and it was very seamless because they didn't even see the technology. And we use the same thing with the drones and with the GoPro. I don't think a lot of people even notice the GoPros. I think once people were walking the line, they just interacted with it just like they would a normal person. So, I haven't seen all the footage, but I'd like to take a look at it and kind of see what the responses were. And that's the idea, is that people don't notice it's there. And then from a training perspective, we did pick up on some pieces where we do need to talk to the incident command aspects of it. We had the live video feed of the drone footage in the command room, and the command staff wasn't really utilizing it because they had never used it before.
Good example, right?
Yeah.
There was no means of injecting that into their training or into their
Right.
procedures and such, and so it's sort of an irritation if in one or just a neutral item to others. But that then says that once again, the exercises are so valuable because they let you see that problem, and then you can very easily now prepare for that in a real activity.
Right.
So those two things that you said, John. One is the appearance of that technology but not being used, which is normal. That's to be expected. The other one was the issue of the pre-application and all on the web. That's like a mark. That's what the future's all about. Everything's going to be on in that way.
Right.
So, how does that translate to a real-world exercise, a real-world event? Is there a correspondence there? That is, would we expect people to sign on for assistance or something like that through social media or through some other electronic means, and no longer have someone coming around door to door with a clipboard and filling paperwork out?
We're already seeing it today. I mean, so there are a number of apps that have been built. FEMA has its own app. The Red Cross has its own app. The City and County of Honolulu has an app. And those apps allow you to take damage assessment photos and send it in directly to the emergency management officials. And so you're taking something that would have taken maybe hours or days to be able to get to the right people, and immediately you can see that a bridge is washed out because you're getting that feed directly from the people. And whether it's through those formal apps or just through social media tools, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, we're seeing it every day in the disaster response. People are really using the technology in ways that we've never expected.
That's really interesting. How do people, where I live in Waimanalo, get access to the knowledge of how to get those apps in their system? In their, I'm sure that Androids and cell phones are different, iPhones are different, so the things they don't like to work together very well. So how does someone find that out?
It's not easy. Yeah.
We
It's
have a lot of
outreach.
community
Yeah.
great groups that are already evolving. They're working really hard with both the state and the city and the safety and law enforcement people that continue to preach the technology side of it. And they do community outreach. They show technology. They have community speakers come in. So I think slowly but surely we're doing a lot of that. And the more people get familiar with watching videos or watching technology grow, and the different icons that it represents, they'll feel more comfortable with asking those questions that, how do I start, or what do I need to get supported on that knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, the neighborhood organizations have been a great tool. Hawaii Kai Strong is one that just had a hurricane preparedness session on Wednesday, and we talked about, shelter openings and whatnot, and how you can go to the Red Cross app and you can see which shelters are open within your neighborhood. And those are the type of things that, again, previously you had to call the Department of Emergency Management, or you might have to call 211, find out what's going on. Now everybody has it in their hand. As long as cell phone coverage is up, before a disaster, they can see, that type of information.
So that's something that probably needs to enter into the school system, doesn't it, at the elementary level, so that the kids coming out of the school system automatically appreciate that there are these kind of apps are coming down and they're going to be changing all the time and becoming available, and they'll figure out some way how to get them included in their own personal gear. That would be an interesting aspect to have DEM have that presence in the school systems, because all the kids are going to go through school. They're going to turn into adults like us, but they'll know a lot more than we do because they've been through that sort of thing.
I mean, the White House does have outreach efforts focused on apps and building apps. There's something called disasterapps.gov that has a listing of all the different apps that have been developed. Ready.gov is another good place for finding that information. And then Hawaii has been launching its own readiness campaign through the Department of Health. So.
That's interesting. Now, Margie and I are both part of the Waimanalo CERT team, and we've been through the training there the last couple of years. And I will say that about maybe 2 years ago when we started down that path, the notion of apps that are dealing with this kind of emergency operations were just sort of at the beginning stage, I think. And I think we had one discussion, and at the end of the discussion, it was evident that there were about 15 different sources of information one could turn to as Waimanalo, for Waimanalo to figure out what's happening to it. 15 different. So if you have different people that have different sources of information, different apps, and it's not going to be quite aligned and correlated. So anything we can do to bring it together into a common stream of some kind that then provides a more common operating picture, as you say, expressed in what the public needs to know would be really a cool thing to have happen.
I'm excited to use the video that you have. You know, we have a lot of, now that we've done the full-scale exercise, we want to reach out to our organizations, companies, private, and, go out there and introduce our closed pods. We want to get more companies to take part of this whole Strategic National Stockpile by they, coming to go through our training. We'll provide them with a easy turnkey, opportunity to talk about the closed pod toolkit, which is basically a seamless document that we will train them on how they can run their individual pods for their companies, and so that their employees, they can come to work, continue their operations, take their drugs for themselves and their families, and mark that up for them not having to go to the open pod. And
so the Department of Health will provide pods on the private property of private companies, is that right?
What we're looking for is partnerships. So they
Okay.
would come in for the training. We would, have them go through the Department of Health Strategic National Stockpile training as a closed pod, and they would sign the appropriate documents, and they would get the up training. And again, at the time of release, and if we had to activate open and closed pods, they would be considered a closed pod. They would make arrangements with us. We would, with them, update the numbers ahead of time. They would know how many employees that they have in their company. They would send that to us in a period of time, and then we would make arrangements to drop off the drugs at a certain point. Like for this particular scenario here at the Blaisdell, it was an open pod, and the scenario was everybody got affected for anthrax. And so we passed out Doxy and Cipro, and these are the two training bottles that we used, and we were able to pass that out. So those are the kind of things that we're going to do, and we're going to do aggressively and assertively with their across the state, with companies, businesses that want to participate and want to take care of their employees and their families. This is a great opportunity. We've learned a lot of great lessons in the past. We've a lot of great companies already on board, like HECO and some of the other big companies with financial. So they're already actively working with their employees, their training efforts, and we're all partnering up to make sure that we get drugs to people when they need it.
This is something coming to me as having lived here pretty much all my life, except for a period of time on the mainland. This is not the Department of Health I remember. This is a totally lean forward, interactive, proactive Department of Health. And I wonder if that's commonly understood. Is that, do you guys have a PR department or something that tells about this and pushes the story out there?
Every day we're saying the clear message.
Oh, you have the sign on the street. Come to our pod. But how do you promote this kind of knowledge? Again, having the school kids get exposed to it would be one way to start. But are there means of outreach that HR departments or some other point of contact within companies knows how to get a hold of you?
Well, it starts off with
other than the exercise, which
The exercise is a big one. We had a lot of great potential and active closed pod companies and businesses that are already in the system with the Strategic National Stockpile come to the exercise to play as actors, and they took back their experiences to make their own pods in their companies that much more effective for their employees. We continue to work with associations and groups and companies, whether it be cold calling or if they belong to an organization. Like, again, I mentioned the financials here in town, statewide. We have a lot of the hotel and security people that are currently and actively planning and are members of our closed pod team. And again, we'll continue to preach about this great opportunity to get your employees and your company up to speed with an opportunity to provide, again, antivirals, antibiotics in case of disaster.
Closed pod refers to what? Is there an open pod
Right.
also?
Thank you for asking. That's a very important
It's on the
thing.
card right
yes,
there. I
That's
read
right.
it.
It's the Closed Pod Toolkit. So basically, the Closed Pod is a company organization that will be limited to distributing medication and or support material in a disaster emergency. And then the open pods are for the community. Everyone, like we had practiced through the exercise there at the Blaisdell. And that'll be, in their community, whether it be a DOE school or a place it's open to the public. So what we're trying to do is increase those numbers of those closed pods so that we don't have everybody going to the open pods and congesting those. So we want to make sure that we get the right medications to the people in their companies, and again, just trying to make that flow a little bit easier for everybody.
And this is great. And I'd like to come back to another thing right after our next break, and that is how do we think about this in regard to the tourist industry,
Right.
where you have Waikiki and you got a million people jammed in. I guess it's a million people or so jammed in there. Let's talk about that when we get back from our next break.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, which streams live on thinktechhawaii.com, uploads to youtube.com, and broadcasts on cable OC16 and Alelo 54. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and one of our delights is to be partnered with Think Tech Hawaii and produce programs every week. Every Monday at 2 o'clock, we have a show called E Hana Kako, which means let's work together. So we bring people from all across the nation and the country, and certainly throughout the islands, together here to talk with them about how to work together, and how to work together to do the following: to build a better economy, a better government, a better society. So if you're interested in the research of our think tank, the Grassroots Institute, or if you're interested in how that's applied at the governmental and community and business levels, you'll enjoy the fascinating conversations with our guests on E Hana Kako every week on Think Tech Hawaii at 2 o'clock on Mondays. Until our next show, I'll see you. Aloha.
We're back on for our final segment here, folks. Friday afternoon, downtown Honolulu. Ted Ralston and our fantastic guests once again on where the drone leads. The drone leads to a closed or open pod
right.
near you
That's
in times
right.
of disaster, right?
That's right.
Terry
Thank
Visperas,
you.
thanks for coming out again. John Shear, always a pleasure. And we were just talking at break about not just the central aspect of this exercise, but you had distributed elements around companies representing other closed and open pods during this exercise, which is incredible. How did you coordinate all that? How did the demand or the draw at Tripler, for example, get reflected back to headquarters or get back to the central and decisions made on logistics and that? Was it? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about closed pods, and again, not only did we exercise the open pods, but we really did a good job of exercising the closed pod element, and this was a great opportunity to work with our military community, where we worked with Tripler Hospital and some of the military campuses, and they were the central focus on distribution through those different campuses. What do you say? What's that right word? Not campuses,
Installations.
but installations. Thank you. And we also worked with our Department of Education, and we had our delivery systems take these medications, again, for the timing of it all, for the location of it all, for the logistics of it all, to strengthen that effort to some of the locations like in Waianae, to Waimanalo. We went to Kaiser to actually play through the closed pod scenarios that in an actual emergency and that we'd had to activate the Strategic National Stockpile.
Did you have the same situation? You had people coming in from the public who were playing acting and this sort of thing?
Right. We had in the military installations, we had them go through and they distributed to different parts of the island. And John,
I think it was about 700 some participated in the military side. They actually distributed to a little over half dozen locations, and then they went through the whole process of filling out the screening form, checking to make sure they had the right meds, and then getting the meds to the people. So again, that's the idea, is that you're trying to exercise a plan, and that's what the plan calls for. And so the more medications that can go to these closed pods, that's less waiting in line that the public or the visitor industry has to do. Because the expectation to have somebody go from Waikiki to Blaisdell is not as easy as you would think. And so the idea is, let's get the medications to the people instead of having people wait in line.
Oh, absolutely. Push them out to the front as much as you can. Think about a school for a moment, and we'll talk about the tourist industry. Would a school be considered a closed pod and dealing just with the school population, or would that be also dealing with the community in the area? And then,
in most case scenarios, it would be an open pod,
Open pod.
because of, again, the resources and the community that'll be surrounding that school. So yeah, that would be, but we wanted to tap the logistical part, making sure that we have that down, being able to, you know, deliver it on time and, you know, intact, and that all was very successful for us to be able to work with our partners at the Department of Education and our logistics experts. And again, it was very, very successful to see that through.
that's great. And I would think in the school situation, the school would, in some respects, actually pull in or associate with the family members of the students and the people, the workers in the school. And so it's not limited just to the population. It is almost has to be extended or expanded to the larger population, including the family members and such.
So there's a lot of possibilities with closed pods, for sure.
Right, I mean, you have to think through the population you're dealing with. It's 1.6 million
You have
throughout the
to plan
state.
it.
Yeah,
You have to do some
1.6 million
planning.
throughout the
It's
state,
unreal.
including the visitor population. You have to make sure they understand where to go, where to get the meds. It's very easy to tell people go to Kaiser or go to Kalani or whatever, and they know that that's where they need to go. Just realize that with this particular scenario with anthrax, you've got to get the medications to people really within 48 hours of the governor requesting them to be able to give the most impact for the meds.
So how do we
it's
deal
not a lot
with
of
the
time.
tourist industry? Again, think of Waikiki and think of, I guess, a day in the life of Waikiki. Probably half the people are there and the other half the people are around the island somewhere doing something. So they're potentially subject to the closed pods at their own hotels, and they're also subject to the open pods wherever they may be in a community situation.
And we've been working with the Hotel Association, some of the people in the security area of the hotels.
Jerry Dolak and that
You're
bunch?
right.
Okay.
You named him, and
Yeah, okay.
he's going to get a lot of calls because you just said his name, but that's okay.
All right.
Jerry, he's been great, a partner with us, and he's been working aggressively and assertively with our partner agencies with other hotels there in the Waikiki area and beyond, in Ko'olina. We also have addressed that. But they have creative solutions that they brought into us, the Department of Health, to be able to distribute medications to their own clientele in their hotel, and which has been something that we would never have thought about, but they're the experts in the hotel industry, and they said, hey, we can do it this way, and we can do it more efficiently. I said, hey, go for it, let's do it.
That's great. That's like a
So-
business continuity
Yeah.
in their mind because, I mean, they depend on the tourist
Right.
business for, obviously, for everything. And so the fact that they're taking that lean forward that position is really, really cool. Now, how about other agencies in the state? How about water, for example? Is water, clean water, that are not obviously somehow managed in this same way in a disaster situation?
Right. I mean, we have had conversations with them, and we're actively working with, say, the Board of Water, HECO, like I mentioned earlier. So all of these different agencies, you know, we still have a lot more agencies and a lot more private businesses and companies that we would like to touch, you know, more in the travel area, the airlines, you know, maybe a lot of the warehousing, you know, in the area. I mean, they all employ people over 200, you know, or more. I mean, those are the kind of numbers that we think will make a big impact for them to go to work, pick up their drugs for them and their families, and not have to go to the open pods and saturate that area. You know, it's just getting, again, the time is of essence, and so we want to make sure that we can spread our wings that much more, reaching into the community and private businesses to get medications to people in a timely manner.
You know, and speaking of getting medications to people in a timely manner and recognizing that this show is all about drones, it says so right there on the card. There's nothing wrong with systems like this, even something as small as this. This thing can deliver about 3/4 of a pound of stuff somewhere. And 3/4 of a pound is a lot of this stuff if you take the heavy casing off and put it in a Ziploc or something. So it would be really interesting to do that as a future exercise, even not in the 5-year refresh SNS, but even something smaller, just what it would be like to get over a valley, over a flooded river, over a road that's out or something like that. And in fact, that was even a consideration in the Puna lava outbreak 2 years ago, that maybe that would be a factor that some of the University of Hawaii Hilo drones could get into in terms of you can't get over the lava. So if there's people on the other side and they've got to have meds, that's one way to get them there. So the other thing is in this use of drones, and I was looking at the video from this one and from the one that Mike Elliott had, it occurred to me that a simple surveillance of an open area where there's a lot of parking issues, there's a lot of land, transit issues, you got a footpaths and such. Just a simple overhead imagery of how things are flowing would be useful, I would think, in the incident management game. I'm not quite sure who in the ICS would be responsible for that. But in fact, that actually brings up the question, when there's a stoppage in flow, when the people aren't getting there because there's a problem in the parking or there's a problem in the road or something, I wonder how that message is created and is notified upstream so that some corrective action can be taken. I have a feeling that something like this, doing a perimeter surveillance periodically, would let you get as much lead time on the discovery as possible and get a fix going.
Yeah, I mean, in the incident command system, you have what's called the planning section. The planning section has a situation unit, and the whole purpose of the situation unit is keeping aware of what's taking place throughout the community. So any eyes and ears that are out there are fantastic. We've never had this technology before, so now you're getting live streaming video from a handheld phone that you never had before. So when before you might need to send HPD out there to find out if there's a traffic stoppage, now you've got someone at that scene sending in, whether it's Meerkat or you name it, a Periscope, they can get that video right to where it needs to go. So it gives unprecedented access to the decision makers on what's really taking place. Now the challenge is really information overload. How do you wean out all of the different feeds that are taking place? And I've monitored some of the disasters that have happened here, the tsunami threat from Japan, and those tweets are coming a mile a minute. I mean, just for Rizal, there was thousands of pictures that were being sent. And so how do you get through all that data and figure out what's really important to get to the governor so he can make a decision?
Is your organization, the International Association of Emergency Managers, are they thinking about that overload situation and how to parse things out, how to give truth to things, and how to decide what's important and what's not important in that total flow coming in?
It is. It's one of the premier organizations for emergency managers throughout the world. We've got thousands of members, and the idea is we have an emerging technology caucus that I'm a member of, and that's what we do. Is we at our annual conferences we talk about the latest and greatest technology. We have monthly calls where we go over those type of things, put newsletters together. But just like anything, getting technology into people's hands and figuring out what to do with it, that's the hard part. What are the standards that need to be there? Are there plug and play issues, interoperability issues when it comes to communications? All that needs to get worked through for the emergency management community, and it's challenging.
Let me do this. Again, this show does things. We negotiate salaries, we deliver parts, we perform missions for the health department. One of the people at this very table about 3 weeks ago, Gretchen West, is part of one of these international business development companies that deals with the business model and the insurance liability management and such. They deal a lot with the UAVs. And she was saying what's totally underrepresented in the UAV business is the end user's needs. And she's created an organization called CDA, Commercial Drone Alliance, I think, or something like that. And they've got launched this week in Atlanta at the annual conference of all the drone people. And they're looking for people I'll send you the paperwork, to participate. I think IAEM, is that how you
That's it.
do it? Okay,
IAEM,
would be a great partner in establishing the end state. Because just something very simple, here in Hawaii, wind. If a drone can't handle 30 knots of wind, it probably isn't something you ought to have in your kit.
Sure. Because
You can only use it on a low wind day. It's not really going to do the job. You can't depend on it. If you can't depend on it, you're never going to get it anywhere close to the ICS. So having the end state users from this very experience and the experiences that go beyond this come together and state the requirements would be a great thing for the IAEM, I think, to get involved in.
Well, I think it's also, if you look at what the Department of Health just did, you had a plan that was developed, you trained on the plan, you did an exercise on the plan, and one of the key feedbacks from the participants was get more of those end users' perspective, filling out forms. We had access and functional needs participants that were there, and they're saying, hey, you need to have it in Braille. You need to have, there was probably 80 different languages that the forms have been translated into, but you might have missed the 81st. And so the idea is it's not just translating, it's getting the end user's perspective of what needs to happen so they can get you that feedback.
I'd like to think of an exercise we can run as soon as you can that would do a field check on some of these things we're speaking of with regard to drones, to start that thinking process of what the IAEM would like to begin thinking about for end user needs. And I will say that another thing happened this week that is really to our collective advantage. The FAA has redefined the terms recreational use of drones. It now includes every skill development you can think of if it's associated with a credentialed and accredited educational function, K through 12, undergraduate, graduate, whatever. So that the term recreation no longer means just watching model airplanes fly through the sky. It means developing skills. It means developing the flight management of something like this in a confined environment. It means operating over and near people of this type, high winds, precision operation, dropping stuff, whatever fits that picture. If it's associated with an educational orientation, now what we can do is create educational partnerships with UH, with the Department of Medicine up there, for example, if that's the proper association for Department of Health, or the Urban Planning Organization and Architecture, and generate education-oriented, which then is legally covered, but find out how these new technologies, especially this one, fit in that domain. And John, I really want to spend some time with you, on camera, off camera, at the beach, in the bar, I don't care where.
Bar sounds good.
We need to work together and figure out my pitch for June for the National Fire Prevention Association. It's the same thing we're talking about. How do you change the tires on the fire truck going down the street at 60 miles per hour?
Sure.
How do you put drones into the operation of an otherwise very, very legacy-based incident command system? So, gentlemen, I thank you so much for the opportunity to interact. And,
no, we thank you for the time.
We got more to do here, and when you see those videos, we'll get together one more time, and we'll talk about the analytics coming out of that. I'd like to bring Ocean into that game. They have great video analytics that I think would be part of this cognition process. But once again, so many things we could talk about, and I thank you so much for your spirit and Terry Visperas once again. And folks, at this point, we'll shut the show down. I will say that next Friday, actually, Margie and I will be in Australia. We're going down to defend Hawaii in the World Sprint Outrigger Championships in the category called the 70s. Can you believe that? I don't know anybody else who's 70.
Born in the 70s, right?
Well, I'll go with that, right? Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, and Mike Elliott, who was there at your SNS exercise, will be actually hosting the show. We'll be talking about a sister issue, which is video productions and that sort of thing.
Great.
So once again, Terry,
Thank you.
thanks so much,
Appreciate your
man.
time.
John,
Thanks.
okay? Missouri and all, thanks a lot, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.